From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Anne-Marie Hordern, I'm Joe Matthew.
We begin with breaking news as Moody's joins the other major rating agencies in downgrading U.S. credit from stable to negative, saying the downside risks to America's fiscal strength have increased.
This, of course, comes with only a week until government funding runs out, with no apparent plan in Congress to avoid that from happening. And so, Anne-Marie, we're in a bit of a bind here today. We're talking about a laddered CR in the House. The Senate says that's dead on arrival, and we could find ourselves in this very place a week from now talking about a shutdown only hours away. This is why you get an incident like this with Moody's.
Well, remember, Moody's put the U.S. government and mostly those members on Capitol Hill on warning in September, saying they were concerned about this. If you are the brand new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and you get this in your inbox, how concerned are you to make sure that you do not shut down now?
Yeah, how true. Joining us from New York now to get into this more specifically is Bloomberg Economics editor Michael McKee. It's good to see you, Michael. Thank you for the time here with breaking news on Bloomberg. Can you bring to us the significance of this? As Anne-Marie reminds us, we had a warning right around the time we avoided a shutdown a couple of weeks back. We're now a week away from another. We hear about chaos in Washington, and now it's coming out from Moody's.
Well, it isn't clear what the long-term effects of this would be. Of course, Fitch downgraded the U.S. Back during the debt ceiling crisis earlier this year, and S&P downgraded the U.S. way back in 2011 when there was also a debt ceiling crisis. So the question is, will Moody's follow through on their negative watch and downgrade the U.S., cut its rating to AA from AAA? This seems to be a warning shot that they might do that if we get very close to or go into a government shutdown. But the question is then what happens? This is not a situation like in corporate bonds where it automatically means that some portfolio managers can no longer hold the debt and they would have to sell U.S. treasuries. That's not going to happen. It will probably raise interest rates, but maybe only by a few basis points. After S&P cut the U.S. back in 2011, interest rates went up, but then fell back down rapidly. And a lot of people said it showed that the U.S. could get away with not having the highest credit rating. The long-term issue is that, of course, the U.S. can't pay its debts if the interest rates continue to rise and spending continues. So you were talking about Mike Johnson, the new speaker. To a certain extent, it helps make his case that spending needs to be cut. But whether the rest of Congress will pay attention to Moody's or not is an open question.
Mike, I'm looking at the press release, and Moody's says the key driver of the outlook change to negative is Moody's assessment that the downgrade risks to the U.S.'s fiscal strength have increased and may no longer be fully offset by the sovereign unique credit trends. Well, if that's the case, and already we've had Fitch and already we had S&P, is Moody's behind the curve?
You could argue that, but then people said that S&P was way ahead of the curve in 2011. The issue is this, Anne-Marie, the U.S. doesn't have any problem paying its bills. We've got a printing press, to put it bluntly, and we will always be able to pay our bills unless they decide not to, which was the issue with the debt ceiling. In this case, what Moody's is talking about is political dysfunction that makes it harder for analysts to understand what the cost is going to be of U.S. debt, how that's going to change, and whether the U.S. is going to cause problems for creditors as they try to figure out what the U.S. fiscal situation is going to be in the future. It's not a question of whether the U.S. can pay. It's a question of whether the U.S. will pay and will do anything to bring its debt under control. This is really a question of the debt costing more rather than any kind of a default question.
Right, Michael, thank you for being with us in the clutch here. Breaking news with Bloomberg's Michael McKee on Balance of Power. Now I want to add the voice of Terry Haines, the founder of Pangaea Policy, is with us here at the table in Washington. And Terry, we're glad you're with us at this moment because we need some guidance here. We just heard from the U.S. Treasury. We disagree with Moody's shift to negative outlook. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that, but do you disagree?
Well, I think for markets, this is a big I told you so. Markets have been shaking the trees for months now, saying, we are much more concerned about debt deficit and the fiscal situation in the United States than we were before, really for the first time in about 40 years. But what they've gotten is pretty resounding silence from Washington, generally speaking. Politics as usual that doesn't take that concern into account. And I think now you're going to be in a position where they're going to have to pay much more attention to it than they did before.
I, keep coming back to this CBO chart that they put out over the summer, which showed that by 2051, and we have the chart, the biggest line item in the U.S. budget is going to be paying off our interest more than all the entitlements, defense spending. How could the Treasury Department be comfortable with this?
I imagine they're not comfortable, but they are not in a position to be saying anything differently, frankly, and they've put themselves in that position. Secretary Yellen has been saying for weeks, months, even years, that markets shouldn't have to worry about any of this, that things are fine, despite even most recent evidence of increased borrowing costs. That will now be just for one bit of debt even bigger than the current expenditures of the United States government. So they're not going to be in a position to have to ignore this anymore. And frankly, I think that's going to start changing the debate in Washington into a way that starts talking about fiscal constraints.
I spoke earlier today with Congresswoman Victoria Spartz of Indiana, Republican, who says she will resign before the end of the year and leave her seat if a debt commission is not approved. We saw yesterday Mitt Romney and Joe Manchin come together with legislation to create a debt commission. Terry, do you roll your eyes and you say Simpson, Bowles, super commission, call me back when it matters? Or is that what needs to happen?
I'm rolling eyes.
Okay.
The reason why I roll eyes, frankly, is because it is a responsibility of the elected representatives in Congress to make those decisions. A debt commission, frankly, only puts those decisions off. I dare say that most of them hope that's exactly what happens, that the decision gets put off by the debt commission working on it, and then, hopefully things will be much more under control than they are right now. Although what you see is a world where they can't stop spending, deficit keeps going up, debt keeps going up, and now we have at least two crises on top of that we're trying to fund. And I refer to the Israel and Ukraine aid packages. So,
and if our viewers are just tuning in, we should remind them this is just breaking within the last hour. The United States credit rating outlook was changed to negative from stable from Moody's. And Terry, if you are getting this headline and press release in your inbox and you're Mike Johnson, is this a lot of more pressure for you to make sure you can keep the government open?
Yeah, I think so. I was just sitting here with you all right before airtime, and I had three immediate reactions. The first was I think the likelihood of a shutdown probably decreases a little bit. I'd already had it at something like 60-40, so maybe let's take it to 70-30. The desire of members not to look heedless in the face of the markets and the rating agencies, I think, just got more important than it did before. I also think that you're going to have continued calls for increased defense spending. That's not going to change, and I think the aid package, frankly, takes longer than it did before, because they're going to have to figure out not only how to or what money to put in, but there will be increased pressure on how to pay for it than there was, say, a couple of hours ago.
Boy, there's a lot there for the new speaker to digest, but we're 7 days away and there's no path here. If we can get back to the actual process involved, do you see a path for a continuing resolution to keep the government open a week from today, or do you leave here and write a note to clients that says market negative?
I am where I was, which is I think there's an extension of government spending for probably another couple of months.
Okay.
They're going to have to figure out exactly how to make this work. They have, in the House, have a very difficult time even putting new appropriations bills on the floor. So that what that argues for is something that happens after Christmas. Of course, they've not taken those arguments before. But we're still going to be talking about this at least at Christmas and probably a little bit afterwards.
Can't wait for that.
Won't it be great?
Yeah.
John Farrow, even though it's his weekend, because he wakes up very early, he says that you have to ask him the question I've asked him before. Is the U.S. government losing the unique privilege of acting recklessly?
Oh, absolutely. John has asked me that question before, and I answer it the same way I did then. Absolutely. And for the first time in 40 years, one thing I've said to markets and will say to you all is that there's only one politician in Washington that's been around long enough that remembers the last time markets reacted badly to a United States fiscal situation. That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden's not going to do anything because basically he's hawked to his free spending left. And the rest of them have never seen anything like this before. And so that actually all by itself increases the degree of difficulty in trying to fashion whatever solution is going to happen.
Does the 1% budget cut kick in come January because they won't have this figured out in time?
I think temporarily, yeah. That's likelier than not.
So we've got a new sequester to look for.
Yeah, and then what they'll do is they'll override it.
Right.
In the end, because because that's the way it goes.
But Terry, when you see these debates on Capitol Hill, they're about a small slice of our budget.
Right.
No one wants to touch defense.
Right.
No one's going to touch Social Security. No one's touching any of these entitlements.
Right.
Until they actually have a plan for the 60 to 75% of the budget, we're just going to keep going on this track.
Yes, we are.
So what should they do? If you say there's no point of Simpson Bowles.
Yeah. Well, there's no point because it's bucking responsibility.
Yeah, but how do you explain to the American people this is why we need to actually look at entitlements?
Well, they won't until after the 2024 election. I will give you the presidential debate earlier this week as a perfect example of this, right? There were a couple of touches on the need to kind of rein in debt deficit and fiscal. Nikki Haley did this, but then got right off of it, and almost as if you touched the stove, but not too hard.
Right.
There is no percentage in having a debate that they haven't prepared the American people for first going into an election year, and therefore none of them will do it.
Well, so does a re-elected Joe Biden, and we'll throw that hypothetical for the sake of this conversation out there, serve his country best by moving off of this position and, in fact, dealing with, as a lame duck president, once and for all, Social Security and Medicare?
Sure. I think absolutely, yes. He's also going to have to get a not lame duck Congress to have to deal with that, and that's where the rubber meets the road. The last time we had any move in that direction is going on 20 years ago now, when George W. Bush tried exactly the same thing, broadly speaking, and got absolutely nowhere in Congress, even with people that were broadly sympathetic to him. So, high degree of difficulty, no political capital on Biden's part to try to achieve anything at all. But at the same time, given your hypothetical, you could see Biden, weirdly making kind of common cause with the purest Republican right.
How about that?
That actually wants to do something about something.
And actually make a difference in your second term.
Yeah, just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder.
Absolutely. This is why we call Terry Haines. As history repeats itself, not only with reckless spending, but another downgrade. Terry Haines, the founder of Pangaea Policy, we thank you for joining us at the table. Our panel is coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV.
All right, we're going to bring in our political panel, Bloomberg's reporter, Dan Flatley and Kate Davison. As we look at this news this evening, and this is coming from Moody's, the United States outlook is what they cut to negative from stable. Of course, Moody's has put us on watch already in September. Now they're talking about the outlook. And all of this comes, of course, Kate, as we're facing down a potential government shutdown, 12:01 Saturday, November 18th. What do you make of this?
Well, as you said, I mean, it's sort of amping up the warning, right? I mean, one of the biggest issues here has to do, well, there's two main ones, right? I mean, it's not just the political sort of chaos and dysfunction, which is not a surprise or news to anyone in Washington who's seen these budget battles play out and these fights over the debt ceiling and now government shutdown threats routinely. Nothing new. But we're in a situation now where the debt trajectory is a lot different. There were a number of years where things were looking pretty good. And of course, since the pandemic, debt has jumped up, and unexpectedly this year, deficits twice as much as they were last year. So I think the one other really interesting issue that they flagged is affordability, right? And so there's different ways of looking at that. You can look at debt to GDP, which is obviously going up, but with interest rates as high as they are, interest costs are going up, right? That's eating up a bigger share of the budget. So a couple of factors here. It can't just be blamed on, dysfunction in Washington. It definitely does have to do with kind of shifting fundamentals, underlying fundamentals of the debt situation.
So what's the point of double secret probation instead of
I
just a
don't know.
downgrade, which we seem to be begging for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess you'd have to ask Moody's. I'm really not sure, but I think that the timing is certainly very interesting. As you pointed out, a week before Congress has to come together and figure this out.
It almost feels like they were pushing Speaker McCarthy to get something done. It now feels like they're pushing Speaker Johnson to get something done. And
Are you suggesting this is political somehow?
well, they're saying it themselves. Without effective fiscal policy measures to reduce government spending or increase revenues, they expect fiscal deficits to remain very large, significantly weakening debt affordability.
Yes, exactly.
And they talked about last time the governance in
Dysfunction.
Washington.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
You can't hide from it.
Dan, what are you hearing about when you talk to people in Congress about actually keeping the government open? I think that has to be something that Moody's needs to see first, right, if they're not going to go for a full-on downgrade.
Right. Well, I think if you talk to the Mitch McConnells of the world, obviously, they're going to tell you we need to keep the government open. It's an imperative. It's part of our job as representatives. You talk to some of the folks on the House side, they are very serious about cutting the deficit, reining in spending. This is a very big political issue for certain members of the House Republican Conference, especially. So where do you find common ground? And that common ground seems to be shrinking below our feet here in Washington. So it's a question of timing. It's a question of pressure. And perhaps this gets them to an agreement. This Moody's outlook gets them to an agreement to kick the can a little bit further down the road. But this issue is certainly not going away anytime soon.
Well, yeah, as we count down 7 days here, here's what the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about Republican efforts on a continuing resolution that would cut spending. Let's listen.
A continuing resolution that is at the fiscal year 2023 levels is the only way forward, because that's the status quo. Members of the House Republican Conference have no idea what a laddered CR means, what it represents, or how it would possibly be implemented, let alone the American people. The notion of a laddered CR is another extreme right-wing policy joyride that is reckless and would only crash and burn the federal government. It's a non-starter.
Okay, so this is the kind of stuff they're sitting back watching at Moody's, and you wonder why we get a headline like today. There's no path. Sarah Chamberlain from the Main Street Republican Partnership told us yesterday she thinks they might be able to pull something out in the end, but it's not looking promising.
She didn't sound as confident as she did
true.
when Speaker McCarthy put that final CR
and predicted that we would avoid a shutdown. Maybe that's not even the point, though, because we're going to have a continuing resolution and then go into a new year with a potentially worse situation and an across-the-board 1% cut. It sounds like we deserve what happened today. Do you agree?
Well, I think when you look at Moody's language and you look at the situation, you almost see the ghost of the McCarthy speakership somewhere in there, because, he lost his speakership essentially by pulling back from the brink. And I think that, you look at the Moody's language, you look at the situation right now, they're trying to put together a spending plan. There is a little bit of a sense that they need to take this more seriously. There's a bit of a push, perhaps, from Moody's, if I could say that.
Yeah.
But I think that what ultimately is going to happen is up to a very restive Republican conference in the House right now, and whether they're able to come to some sort of agreement that's not going to cost a Speaker Mike Johnson his speakership is a very open question at this point.
Well, on one hand, it makes Mike Johnson and some of these hard-right Republicans that have a lot to say about fiscal responsibility, this feeds right into a lot of that rhetoric.
Sure.
But at the same time, what does he do with this Israel bill, with this pay-for that many are calling political because
it increases the
Because
deficit.
the CBO says it actually increases
like
the deficit. How does he walk that tightrope?
I mean, I think clearly it's extraordinarily tricky, right? I mean, in any sort of negotiation, you have to make both sides feel like they've gotten something out of it. So that's going to be the trick here. But right, I think it's just become clear that the pay for, as you said, cutting funding for the IRS. I mean, that's not it's just not going to fly, and it doesn't actually save any money, as everyone said. It's cost money. I mean, I think that what we're hearing from we saw today the statement from the Treasury Department from Deputy Secretary Adeyemo was interesting. I mean, he's making the point that, look, the Biden administration has put forward plans to sort of reduce deficits, fiscally responsible proposals, and he's really putting it on Republicans for not sort of meeting them in the middle, so to speak, and finding ways to come to an agreement. So I do think that there's certainly more pressure on them, and that's what Speaker Johnson has to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, in the throes of all this breaking news, we haven't had a chance to acknowledge the fact that it's Veterans Day, which is important to us here on Balance of Power and here in the Washington Bureau at Bloomberg. As a matter of fact, our resident Marine who's at the desk with us here, Dan Flatley, look at this, held a little celebration in the newsroom to say happy 248th birthday to the United States Marine Corps. So Semper Fi, Dan. We're delighted that we can share that with you today. A little picture of that pretty cake you had out there in the newsroom.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we want to remember all those who served our country ahead of Veterans Day tomorrow. And I was very grateful that you all let me bring in a cake and have a little celebration and have a little bit of fun with it, too. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, we thank for your service. And also, Dan, honestly, just the way you approach stories sometimes, I just find it fascinating. And I think you bring a level of depth when you talk about defense policy and national security that no one in this Bureau can actually do because of your experience.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right.
Well, I appreciate that. Very kind of you.
Thank you. For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Kate Davison and Dan Flatley, especially Dan. Have a lovely weekend, him and all the other veterans. Coming up, we have more on the Moody's rating outlook downgrade on the United States. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg. Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV, and we've been discussing what's going on. Moody's changing the outlook on the United States to negative. And, Joe, everyone keeps feeling like this almost feels political because of the timing.
Yeah, right. A week away from a potential government shutdown. As we've been discussing, though, you wonder what the reverberations are on Capitol Hill and whether that actually helps to embolden lawmakers to vote for a continuing resolution following what we saw in the ouster of Kevin McCarthy, because they've got 7 days to figure this out.
Right. So Moody's obviously would like to see less political paralysis, but at the same time, does this play into the hands of these fiscal hawks who are saying we are spending too much?
Well, it certainly reinforces their argument.
Yeah, how do you do another continuing resolution potentially without some offsets, which is what Speaker Johnson once floated? No
matter what happens next week, it won't do a thing to put a dent in the nation's debt.
That we do know. We love the CBO chart that shows by 2051, paying off our interest will top everything. Defense, Social Security, Medicare, all our discretion and non-discretionary spending.
This is why the outlook is negative. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. Israel says it is providing quick humanitarian windows to allow people to flee northern Gaza while the military fights Hamas militants. Let's begin our discussion there with retired Brigadier General, former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, Mark Kimmitt. It's great to have you with us here as we observe Veterans Day. General, it's good to see you, and thanks for joining. How do you view this current arrangement with the so-called pauses? Will they be effective enough to actually save civilian lives?
Well, to answer your first question, how do I see it? Politically and diplomatically, right thing to do. Okay. Militarily, wrong thing to do. The fact remains is during these pauses, this is an opportunity for Hamas to regroup, reorient, get themselves put back together. And frankly, it's going to cost a lot of IDF lives.
It doesn't seem like the pause is enough, though, to potentially get these hostages out. Where do we stand on that front?
Well, that's one of the reasons that Prime Minister Netanyahu is so upset about all this, because He has said a precondition for a ceasefire is the release of the hostages. By contrast, what the United States has said is, let's go ahead and do some humanitarian pauses, regardless of the hostage situation.
Is it not too late for most of these hostages? We were talking about this on a daily basis a couple of weeks ago, and attention seems to be turning in a different direction.
No, I don't think so. Even Hassan Nasrallah said it last Friday. We have never released hostages without a negotiation. It's not the modus operandi in the Middle East to kill hostages. They use them as negotiating points, negotiating options. Mm-hmm. So you don't get what you need by executing hostages. You get what you need by releasing hostages.
I was told that not all hostages, and actually Al Jazeera also reported some of this, not all hostages are being held by Hamas. Some are being held by Islamic Jihad.
Yeah, PIDGE is another one of those organizations there. They sort of collude, but on a very loose way. But candidly, I'd much rather be a hostage in Hamas than Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Well, how do you negotiate with
That's exactly
Jihad?
Right. The fact is, you have a telephone that answers when you call them if you're Hamas. The Israelis know exactly where the Hamas leadership is in Doha. They know their room numbers. PIDGE, on the other hand, is more of a shadowy group. So who do you negotiate with? Who do you call? They don't know.
The IDF is now in the heart, as they put it, of Gaza City. What do you make of, what's that reaction? What do you expect in the next couple of days? Is this the invasion?
Well, certainly it's the invasion. Getting into the outskirts of the city, I've been very, very impressed with the IDF. They've done it very quickly, far sooner than anybody would have predicted.
Yeah.
They haven't got to the hard part. They haven't got to the heart of darkness yet, which is the middle of Gaza City where the toughest defenses are.
So that's not what he's referring to as the heart of Gaza City. They have further to go and further to go in the tunnels.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
I want to ask you about what's going to happen next week. Israel, I think, will be on the agenda when Biden sits down with Xi Jinping, but this is going to be a broader conversation about a number of issues. I just mentioned Israel because there's two power struggles right now in the world, huge conflicts, and China and the United States are on opposite ends. And since Speaker Pelosi went to Taiwan, the military communications really have evaporated.
No, that's true. To answer your question, I would say it will all depend on October 10th. October 10th is when the president laid down a red line. He said for any state, non-state actor that wants to intervene in this conflict, no. Now, is this going to be a 2015 Obama red line? Or is he actually going to stand firm if, for example, Hezbollah attacks into northern Israel? The fact is our adversaries look to us for strength or weakness. If we show weakness, they will take advantage of it. So Joe Biden has his opportunity with the red line that he set down. Hezbollah will test it. It is being tested now in Iraq, obviously.
And Syria.
But Xi Jinping is watching.
Does the fact that a second or third front has not opened, at least in a full-blown sense, help the cause for the U.S. in that way? A lot of folks thought this would be a hot war in the north by now.
So Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah, is probably watching that aircraft carrier off the coast in the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. However, the Iranian-backed proxies in Iraq aren't too worried about it. They have conducted 48 attacks since October 7th. They've only conducted 20 more in the entire 2023. They are pushing us hard. We are not reacting for a number of good reasons. We don't want to see the Sudani government fall if we attack. But nonetheless, I'm less worried about what's happening right now in Syria than I'm worried about Lebanon and Syria than I am what's happening in Iraq.
Well, in less than a week, Biden will be sitting down with Xi. So I want to get your take on some of these concerns about the U.S. military's readiness, because it was discussed at the Republican debate this week. Nikki Haley had some reaction about what the United States should be doing in the Asia Pacific. Take a listen.
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs to modernize our military.
The question was asked about how should the U.S. be preparing itself with the exact number of ships in China. Number of different answers. Everyone says we need more. Chris Christie says we actually need more nuclear submarines.
Right.
What would your advice be to
I think
the president?
I think Chris Christie is right on this one. Look, for China to get to Taiwan, for China to get to Australia, for China to get to Japan, they've got to cross water, and I would much rather have a nuclear submarine standing between China and Taiwan than a very, very vulnerable aircraft carrier that can be knocked out with anti-ship missiles.
While we're talking readiness, I have to ask you about what happened on the Senate floor yesterday as Democrats tried to work around Tommy Tuberville's blockade of military promotions by bringing them one by one to the floor. Senator Tim Kaine brought more than 360 nominations to the floor. Each was objected to by Tommy Tuberville. Are we at the point where this is, in fact, impacting readiness or not?
Marginally. I think your question is the right question. It's not necessarily about the people, but it's about the capabilities of the force, the equipment they're using, the readiness of what they're using, the size of what they're using.
But how do you recruit the best and the brightest when they look at chaos on their potential career trajectory held by lawmakers?
No private comes into the Army worried about what the 4 stars in the Marine Corps are doing.
All right. Well said. Retired Brigadier General and former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, Mark Kimmitt. We thank you for your time and insight. Coming up, our closers are with us as we look ahead to what next week may bring. A government shutdown, maybe. Has it made worse by Moody's press release this evening? That's next on Balance of Power.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV as we continue our conversation with breaking news here and a downgraded outlook from Moody's on U.S. credit. We bring in Chief Economist for the U.S. Joint Economic Committee, Christopher Russo, getting a little bit closer to the source here. Christopher, thank you for joining us. This has so much to do about reckless spending, about our ballooning debt, and the lack of any path, it seems, to fix it. And we're a week away from a possible government shutdown here. Is Moody's simply holding up the mirror? Because it seems like the agency is actually in touch with what's happening on Capitol Hill. How do you see it?
I think that's a phenomenal question. First, thanks for having me. I need to say that my views are my own, not those of the United States Congress. But this is an issue that I have been talking about quite publicly for many years now. The U.S. fiscal position is unsustainable, is growing ever more unsustainable. Our low interest rates for a decade or two now have come on the back of the expectations of markets that the United States will resolve that fiscal unsustainability. And what we saw in the report from Moody's today is increasing concern that the U.S. will not. Our research at the Joint Economic Committee has been all about how do we get through that small and ever-closing window to restore fiscal sobriety. There's a way forward, but it's tough and will require political will, which is one reason why I've been so optimistic about Speaker Johnson's debt commission and a similar proposal that's come out of the Senate.
But Christopher, we've been here before with debt commission, Simpson-Bowles. What do you think? How do you think this will be different?
Well, the hope I have is that this will be an independent congressional commission, different than the executive commission that was put together a decade ago, and that frankly didn't have much teeth. The problem with what came out of that process ultimately is that Congress agreed to a set of changes that it ultimately was able to renegotiate regularly. In particular, it was able to renegotiate the Budget Control Act. And so while that process did result in some savings over time, they were much less than projected and was not really addressing the major drivers of our debt, namely our aging population and the fact that people are getting sicker over time, particularly as a result of diseases like obesity. My hope is that through an independent congressional commission, like the BRAC Commission from decades ago, we can allow Congress to set parameters for how we will address this problem while letting experts and other policymakers help figure out the specifics of how to get the math to work. And that's my concern at the Joint Economic Committee, much less about should we go with policy A or policy B. But given that we are considering how to restore fiscal sobriety, we've got to make sure the math adds up.
Well, you know how skeptical the markets are, how skeptical our audience is here, how skeptical our neighbors are when they hear conversations like this. I mean, you get a big eye roll here when you start having this conversation. So what is it, Christopher, darkest before dawn here? Because this feels like a lost cause to a lot of Americans.
You know, there's a saying that I believe goes back many decades before me about how, you know, the great thing about Americans is that they will eventually do the right thing after they've exhausted all of their options. And I continue to be optimistic that the men and women on Capitol Hill and the executive branch, for that matter, will be able to come together and find a solution here. It is essential. Our entire American project is in part built on our promise to always pay our debts. And that promise is not merely to pay back a dollar when you borrow a dollar, but also to make sure that that dollar hasn't inflated 10 or 100 times since we first received it. So it requires political will, certainly. It requires members like my boss, Vice Chairman Schweikert, who has been one of the leading proponents of talking seriously about our debt problem. But I'll say it does require political will, not just from Republicans, but also from Democrats. So I've been pleased to see actions and words from people like Senator Joe Manchin and partnering across the aisle to get things like that done. Again, I can't make any promises. I'm here to do the math and to advise, not to decide. That's the great thing about a republic. Sure. It's not my job to make these sorts of political decisions, but it is my job to try to make sure when those decisions are made, the math will add up.
Christopher, thanks so much for jumping on this Zoom with us this Friday evening. Chief Economist for the U.S. Congress Joint Economic Committee, Christopher Russo there. Coming up with the program, our closers will be back with us, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, to wrap up the week and also look at some other breaking news happening in New York with Mayor Eric Adams. That's next on Balance of Power. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. Now, the FBI seized New York City Mayor Eric Adams' phone in a campaign probe, according to the New York Times. For more, let's bring in our political panel. Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, and Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University. You know, we haven't been able to talk about this because of the breaking news, but this just happened this evening. And it just wasn't one phone, Jeannie. It was 2 iPhones and an iPad. How uncomfortable is this getting for the New York City mayor?
You know, this has been described as a dramatic escalation, and I couldn't agree more. It is a dangerous time for this to happen. This comes on the heels of the FBI raiding the home of his chief fundraiser, a 25-year-old woman who had her home raided, and then, of course, the mayor, who was in Washington, D.C., talking about a crisis involving immigration in the city, turned around and headed home. And next thing, we find this breaking news tonight that, indeed, as you mentioned, they took his electronics. It's a very, very troubling development, and, of course, what we understand is that they are looking for evidence that potentially the government of Turkey may have illegally funded the campaign or helped fund the campaign through straw donations. And so, you know, of course, the mayor maintaining his complete innocence and vowing that he is, you know, as a former law enforcement official, of course, cooperating with officials and has done nothing wrong. But a troubling time for this to happen to the mayor of the largest city in the country.
God knows. Rick, I had to check if this is Mayor Buddy Cianci we were talking about here, but no, it is Eric Adams in New York. How do you conduct damage control if you're Eric Adams when headlines like this are still flying?
Well, I think that he's going to have to bunker in a while and see where this investigation goes. Honestly, it reminds me of a much broader investigation, probably related to Turkish national activity in the United States in general, and that they've sort of found a strain that led to the mayor's office. I would remind everybody that there are others within the Eric Adams administration that have already been indicted on straw donor violations, not necessarily related to the Turkish issue. But look, I think the FBI has actually been cracking down on these kinds of campaign finance violations because there is no, Federal Election Commission activity around this because they've been completely stymied by the board of directors who are 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and nothing happens. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes or how deep it gets. But I think the best we can do is just wait and see.
All right, well, we will wait and see. And as we do, there's still a government to fund. This headline coming out of NBC, the Senate, Joe, is eyeing a clean stopgap measure to fund through mid-January. Okay. So this is very different than what we're hearing from some of the tea leaves we're reading when it comes to Speaker Johnson.
Yeah.
And the clean part and the laddered part.
All true, although we won't see it until tomorrow. We spoke earlier on Bloomberg Radio with Victoria Spartz, who said she did expect that, or at least wouldn't be surprised with a ladder that had some appropriations ending in January and others ending in February, as opposed to each agency getting its own date. Jeannie, what do you think about that? Does it see the light of day?
You know, I don't think so. And I hope that one bright spot of this breaking news with out of Moody's is that the Republicans in the House wise up and realize that it is this political dysfunction that is driving some of what we are seeing that impacts the economy overall. And they should put a clean CR on the table, pass it, and then take the time remaining, whether the deadline is before Christmas or in January, to pass the bills and get our government funded. The notion of trying to do something new at this point, like a laddered CR, is just not going to fly in the Senate or by the Democratic White House.
Rick, what do you make of this? Will this put the pressure, as Jeannie's suggesting, on Speaker Johnson? Or does this actually offer them a roadmap to say, look, Moody's has put us on watch yet again. We need to get our fiscal house in order?
Yeah, certainly as a talking point, it gives him, a weapon in his arsenal to try and get Republicans on board. But he may have his own attitude about what that outcome is, right? I mean, it's not clear that Speaker Johnson thinks it's a good idea to have a clean CR and just get past this moment. I'd remind him, too, that he's not necessarily in charge. I mean, the House is a renegade band of Republicans right now. They couldn't even get a universally liked fiscal decision on the financial services appropriation this week. I mean, like, everybody wanted that to pass, but there was this combination of moderates and conservatives who said they argued so much with each other, you couldn't even get that done. So that was considered an easy thing to do. If Speaker Johnson wants to do something hard, he better have a better whip operation than they had for the financial services appropriation.
We're coming off the latest Republican presidential debate this week and would love both of your take on this. If we can get a taste of this, Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy going at it repeatedly at the debate in Miami a couple of nights ago. Here they are.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
They're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy answer.
Okay, so that went well. Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels, your scum, just a moment of the conversation from the other night. Jeannie, what do you think? The high heels finally did come up. It didn't seem to do anything to hurt Ron DeSantis, but that conversation did seem to help Nikki Haley this week. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. At this point, it is Nikki Haley versus Ron DeSantis for, the table at the kids' Thanksgiving. And that's where we are. The winner of this debate, I think the moderators did a great job. And I also think Donald Trump, of course, won because he had every reason to stay away. We look at the ratings now, they were half of what they were in that first debate. And so as good of a job and substantive as the debate was, the audience was half the size. And, of course, Donald Trump, is, leading by 30, 40 points in most national polls.
Right, the tale of two primaries. There was an actual debate with, potential candidates, but then there was a rally with the man who's leading in every single poll. Just to get back, though, to that moment with Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley, it seemed like that was a moment that people liked. People liked what she had to say. They're 5-inch heels. I'm gonna tell you off. You do not speak to me like that. But it was a bit sexist.
Yes and no. I mean, it was a little reminiscent of Sarah Palin's convention speech, lipstick on a pig. I think that there's an advantage for Nikki Haley because she can distance herself from the old boy network that's standing there with her. And she did a good job of that.
Leaning into it.
And leaned into it. And I must say that one of the things that I took from the Bloomberg poll that was just released is they always ask, what have you heard lately, seen, read, and heard about all these candidates?
Yeah.
Nikki Haley is the only one out of Republicans and Democrats alike, all those people who are currently saying they're running for president, she's the only one where people said consistently in each state that they've seen, read, and heard more positive things than negative things. Everybody else was negative. Mm-hmm. So she's doing something right now that is conveying to voters that she's been a positive influence in this election.
True. For Biden, it's he's too old, and for Trump, it's too much crime. Rick Davis, Jeannie Shanzano, our closers this Friday evening. Thank you so much for joining us. All these stories and more on the Washington Edition newsletter.
That's right. Have a great weekend. Have a great Veterans Day. We'll see you back here next week. This is Bloomberg.